to get a good bond. So in that case, what you have to do is you have to treat it like a pavement failure. You have to go in, saw cut those areas out, patch them according to local standards, and then you'll ensure good performance in that area. So depending upon the severity of it, if you can't handle it with pressure washing with industrial detergents or some light grinding to remove a little surface contamination, then you may have to go deeper and do a full depth patch. Structure and casting protection. This is super important in urban areas. You have to protect the utility structures such as manhole covers, catch basin, valve boxes, airplane tie downs, things of that nature. Now, we have an enormous amount of success, and we're not saying this is the only way to do it, but we've had an enormous amount of success using 30-pound roofing felt and duct tape. You can see here, that's exactly what's been done here. Once they tape that off, we typically use a chip seal tab to mark that location, and then we can lay directly over the top of it. The chip seal tab pops back up, exposing where that utility is. When that material cures sufficiently enough that you can get out and walk on it, and before you open it to traffic, you can go out, remove that masking in a proper fashion, get it off the project site, and this is what you see as an end result. So the utility company, in a blink of an eye, the next time they go out there and need to access that utility, they can find it without a problem. Here you can see airport tie downs. This works extremely well as well. You can see it's neat, it's clean, it's effective. It does take time, however, to do this masking off, but extremely important. And if you don't do it, it's going to cause some problem for the agency once you're gone down the road when they need to get into those utilities. Now, let's talk about some more of that. You see this picture up at the top left. It says no. Okay. They've done a great job taping off that water valve. Okay. But what they didn't take into consideration is the concrete. Okay. If you're going to do slurry seals or microsurfacings over concrete, you either need to tack coat that material, you need to tack this material, and or just tape the whole thing off, mask the whole thing off, which is what I prefer to do. I think there's no reason to even fool with whether you're going to have a good bond there or not when you can just tape it off. So in this instance, you can see here they came through, they taped off the entire area, put the chip seal tab down, laid over it. You can see everything looks really good. Of course, you can also see here that somebody just couldn't stand it and had to jump within the traffic zone prior to it being opened up, even though those ironed out with a little bit of traffic wasn't a problem. But you can see they've re-exposed that utility in a perfect fashion. You know, that's professionally done, going to perform great. Agency, contractor, everybody's happy. This is what you need to do. Okay, still on the structure and casting protection. You know, you can see in the right-hand lane tons of utilities that needed masking off. Right here, this is a catch basin, and the catch basin actually the concrete protrudes out into the actual travel lane. And the last thing you want to do as you're applying slurry seal or microsurface into this area is to allow any of that material to flow into that catch basin. It can have an enormous influence on the flow of that water and its ability to get off the roadway. So this is about as a professional job as you can get in masking off those areas. Again, it takes a lot of time to do this, but it is well worth it, as you can see in the end result of the picture in the right hand lane here. You know, catch basins are clean, utilities are available for entry at any time, and this is just what any agency or contractor should do, or agency should demand, and contractors should provide when we talk about utility casting. Okay, on the same subject of casting protection, and this can pertain to the very end of the project as well. If you're doing separate roads, we like to end up on plastic on all of our roads. Rarely do we start on plastic unless it's a unique situation. But when we do bridge decks and end of project, this is how we typically handle it. In picture number 1, you can see they've got a 12-foot wide piece of plastic sheeting. It's taped down and secured, held in place so the wind don't blow it off with cones until the machine gets there. You can see in slide number 2, the machine's applying the material, pulling onto that plastic. They stop, they pick up the spreader box, leaving some waste material there that can be cleaned up a little bit later. And then when you pull that plastic back, you can see that the bridge deck is clean, unstained, and everything's good. So this is the way you can protect the end of the project or bridge decks. Now, another great advantage in doing this, at not only the end of the project but a bridge decks, is that it eliminates any and all handwork necessary in this area right here. That material is box applied all the way up to the joint, so you can ensure good uniformity of material thickness and surface texture up to that point. In years gone by, it used to be very commonplace for the contractor to stop here, pick the spreader box up, leaving a pile similar to this, and then the handwork guys getting out there and moving that material around as best they could to get it in place before it's set up. Now, I'm not saying that that can't be done, and I'm not saying that that can't be done effectively, but I can guarantee you this is a better process that will yield you better results. It will actually reduce a little bit of work and provide you with a better project at the end. So this is kind of what we recommend on bridge decks, into projects, things of that nature. Should provide you good service. Pavement markings and surface preparations. We need to consider the paint markings, raised pavement markings, snow plowable pavement markings, and thermoplastic pavement markings. When we talk about paint, this is just waterborne paint. Most do not require treatment. We do see on airports that most FAA jobs require removal of waterborne paint. Sometimes it's very debatable as to whether that's necessary or not, and the method in which they require that removal can be problematic as well, because the product is so thin. If you're on an airport and they want you to grind that off, then you could be making little bird baths with the grinding operation out there, which may not be the best way to go. So so paint markings typically don't need removal, waterborne paint. Thermoplastic paint should be removed or abraded to produce a rough surface, and we'll talk a little more about that here in just a second. But the ultimate goal, and this goes to all surface preparation items, the goal is to promote and ensure a good bond between the treatment and the pavement. We do not have the luxury of 110 pounds per square yard and gravity like a hot mix asphalt. We have to bond to the existing pavement to perform, and if we cannot bond, we absolutely will not perform. So everything that we do that revolves around surface preparation is about ensuring that good bond. And sometimes with paint markings, you have to address those to ensure that bond. Okay, plastic pavement markings, or as you can see here, this raised pavement marking, those have to be removed. If you try to lay over that or tape that off and mask it and lay over it, you're going to leave a nice big puddle of material around it. It's going to be horrible. You're going to have to hand work it out. It's not going to be good. These things come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Typically, depending upon where you're at, I've seen them anywhere from $4 to $8 a piece. They really just need to be removed, slurry seal applied, microsurfacing applied, and then reinstalled. Their retroreflectivity only lasts a certain period of time anyway, and typically, like I said, they're always removed on our projects. I have seen 20 years ago people try to save them by masking them off. Haven't seen that much anymore, but please don't consider that if you have them on your pavement. Let's talk about snow plowable markers. These are always recessed in the pavement. They've got a reflective lens on them. It's recommended that these markers are removed in advance of any slurry system treatment, slurry or micro. And then when after you get good curing of the material, you can come back and reinstall those treatments or those markers. Now, what we've found works very well in removal of these things is just a jackhammer. You may be able to use something, maybe not as, I wouldn't call it invasive, but a hammer and a chisel, probably not the best way to do it. But in this particular case, an electric jackhammer was used. That marker pops out of there nice and easy. You clean all of the loose material and fragments out of there, and then take a high performance cold mix and patch that, tamp that down, let the traffic run on it for several days, and it will perform very well under the microsurfacing or slurry seal. What we don't want to see is a situation like this. The DOT in this case thought that they wanted to save a little bit of money by taping off all of the snow plowable markers. So every 80 feet going down the center line of this multi-lane divided highway, they had the contractor come out and tape off that marker, which incidentally had no retroreflectivity tab on top of it. So it was really the purpose of it in this particular condition is not good. There's no retroreflectivity at all. What they've done by trying to save this, though, is create an enormous problem. Now they've created a pond. So this thing holds water every rain event. Okay? Never good to hold water on your center line. Okay? Additionally, you can see that this pavement is somewhat distressed. So you're going to see deterioration in this location and every 80 feet down the road throughout this project. And that's going to have an enormous effect on the overall performance of that pavement. All we've done, we've created a pond. We've allowed water to get under that pavement in this location, and that's never a good thing. So ideally, come in, remove those, patch it appropriately, apply the microsurfacing or slurry seal over the top of it, come back in, grind those back in at the end of the job, and you'll have great performance. All right, thermoplastic markings. And this comes directly from the ISSA Design and Inspector's Manual. It is recommended that all thermoplastic pavement markings more than 4 inches wide be removed or at least abraded prior to slurry surfacing installation. The acceptable method of removal include grinding or water blasting, and 80 to 85% removal will ensure a good bond. Water blasting should not be used in areas with excessive cracking. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. When we say markings in excess of 4 inches, we are typically talking about crosswalks, stop bars, arrows, words, railroad crossings, things of that nature where you have starting, stopping, twisting, turning, torquing type traffic. And that's where, if you're going to have a problem bonding to thermoplastic, that's the areas where that problem will be exposed. So a 4-inch thermoplastic marking that runs down the center of the road is not that important unless you've got an enormous amount of buildup. If they've been retraced 2 or 3 times and you got 180 mil thickness of thermoplastic out there, then you can probably get by without removing that material. Now, conversely, in a situation like you see in the picture, even though this is great pavement here, these areas here, that's probably an 8-inch wide stripe there. You've got these arrows, you've got this crosswalk here and stop bar, and these hash marks. Those need to be removed to ensure a good bond. And when we say water blasting should not be used in areas with extensive cracking, and we mean exactly that. Water blasting is a great way to remove thermoplastic and other pavement markings. But if you've got extensive cracking in an area, I've seen the water blasting take a 1/4 inch crack and make it a 1/2 inch crack, just in a matter of seconds by going over it. So, you don't want to create further damage to your pavement by using water blasting in these areas. Again, it's a great process, works very well, but you do have to be cognizant of the fact that it will have an effect on the size of your cracking and can even blow out some pavements if you get into some questionable areas. So very important that you keep that in mind when you're designing a project. Again, the acceptable methods: grinding, water blasting. Sandblasting is listed here. It still is used on occasion, but rarely. You can see here a little, I'd call it a handwork machine, a little more maneuverable than some of the bigger machines. Perfectly acceptable to use, especially in intersecting type areas, stop bars and things of that nature. Just an example of what that equipment may look like and what the end result of the removal might be. And again, 80 to 85% removal is what we're looking for. We do not want to gouge into that pavement and create any type ponding situations. Some examples of some equipment that do it: you can see the grinder on the left, on the Bobcat with the broom behind it. You got to make sure that you clean up the spoils from this removal process in a proper fashion. It's important to know, especially as hot as it is in the deep south where we tend to work, that if you grind up this thermoplastic material and don't remove it, well, then it may re-adhere itself to the pavement in a different location, and then you've got a real cleaning problem on your hand where you have to get out there and scrape it loose and pick it up. So the day that it's being removed, it's highly important that those spoils from that removal process be taken care of in a proper fashion, or it's going to cause a problem. And then, of course, you see the water blasting here. Again, not a lot of cracking here. If he was over here on this longitudinal joint where that stripe was, there may be an issue. But here, perfectly acceptable. Tack coat. Kind of one of the last items we're going to talk about on surface preparation. And you see in parentheses it says if required. Okay. A tack coat preceding a slurry system may improve uniformity of the absorptive nature of a road surface. It may improve application success, but tack coat is not normally required unless the pavement that you're going over is extremely oxidized, dry, or concrete or brick. I can tell you that probably in the last 25 years, I've tacked one project, and that was on an airport. So debonding or delamination is not an issue in our market area, and so therefore tack coat generally is not required. If you do find yourself in a situation where you do have extremely dry, oxidized pavement, or it's concrete or brick, you want to use 3 parts of water to 1 part emulsion and apply that tack coat at a 0.05 to 0.10 per square yard, and allow that tack coat material to dry before the slurry system treatment application. Again, typically not necessary, but if you're going to do it according to that recommendation. All right, that's it for surface preparation. Let's talk about public notification. Again, just like we did with our surface prep, we have to recognize that with public notification, there's an early stage and a final stage. And it's good to know that public notification about the project can yield positive results for the traveling public, the agency, and the contractor performing the work. Methods of notification that have worked well in the past include both early and final stage. Now, I can tell you, having done this for over 35 years, without a doubt, an informed public is far easier to work with than an uninformed public. It behooves the contractor, it behooves the agency to alert the folks that are going to be affected by this treatment installation. It just lets them know what's going on. Not only does it give them an opportunity to explain pavement preservation and the benefits that they will see long term, but it also just notifies them of little inconvenience that they may have as the treatment is being applied. Even though that's just a very short-lived inconvenience, people like to know so that they can make plans. So the early stages that we found that work very well are blurbs in the newspaper, on the radio, cable TV, websites, or message boards. You can see here on the right-hand side of the slide, it's a notice of the Hadley Farms Pavement Preservation Project. And there's a host of information on there. There's a map showing the roads that are going to be completed. And ultimately, when the agency does the first round of notifications, they work together with the contractor and they put on this notifier the fact that, hey, this is your first phase of notification. Please understand this is coming down the line and that you will be affected. The contractor, upon mobilizing to the project, will notify you again and give you the immediate information that you will be necessary so you can make your plans accordingly. Extremely important that we do that. And again, that three-phase process works very well. You can see here, once the contractor shows up, what we typically do is we go door to door. And if they're not home, we leave a flyer on their door stating who we are, what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and also with phone numbers of our project manager and project superintendent on it for any type scheduling questions. Now, we like to put our phone numbers on these flyers for a simple reason. If this person has a question and they try to call the city, and the city says, well, call the Public Works Department, and the Public Works Department says, well, call the street superintendent. Then the street superintendent finally gets reached, and he has to call the contractor. And the contractor says, yeah, Oak Street, we're going to do it 3rd tomorrow. Well, the several hours that it takes to get that done is going to create some concern amongst that resident. They want information quick. And it is far better for them to go straight to the source of information, the person who has the information, the person that can manipulate the schedule, the person that can work with them, rather than going back through the agencies. Not that we don't want them to contact the agency, we just want to handle their concerns as quickly as possible. And we found that if they call our people on the street that make the schedule, and again can manipulate that schedule, that's the best way to do it. So again, numbers on there. So we give them a 24-hour in advance notice, and then the day that we go to do that road, we're going to knock on that door one more time. We're going to knock on it and say, hey, you remember our notifier from yesterday? We're getting ready to get started. If you need to go anywhere, now'd be a great time. Anything we can do for you before we get started, and you give them that last option. And when we follow this process, it always seems to work out well. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some anomalies. There's some folks that are always going to be disappointed regardless of what you do. But as far as success rate goes, way up above 95% of the people really react good to this type of notification, and we highly recommend it. Now, there's a couple of other things you can do as well. To the door-to-door notifications, we put signs out, especially on roads with curbside parking. You can see here, street resurfacing tomorrow, no parking, violator will be towed. That's a very strong statement that generally gets people's attention. Of course, obviously, we have no desire to want to tow a vehicle, but if we're doing a road that has 50 homes on it, and everybody's complied with the contractor's request, and there's one vehicle in the way impeding progress, then yes, we would probably tow that vehicle around the corner to get it out of the way so we can apply our material. Have no intentions of impounding vehicles or things of that nature. You just need to move them, put them in a driveway, do something if allowable by law, and sometimes it requires the local police department to get involved with that as well. But you can see a problem if you've got one car in the way and you're impeding the process that 50 other people have complied with the instructions on. So, and then the notifier, tailor the notifier that you're going to hang on these doors if folks aren't home. Again, letting them know who you are, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. Give them a little brief history of about how long the road's going to take to do, maybe how long it's going to be closed. If you have any special notes, if you're in an area where there's a lot of watering devices to keep the grass pretty green, you want to make sure that people turn off those sprinkler systems prior to doing the work. Last thing you want to do is get out there and do a great job on a roadway and everybody's sprinkler turn on and water runs down the road and washes off a lot of what you've done. So, you have to take these precautions, look at the area you're working in, and again, tailor these notifiers to what you're doing. So that's what we found works the best. And again, don't forget to put your contact name and phone number on there. And then, of course, I've always loved this little picture here. If you describe to them you don't want them to drive through the fresh material, that is a pretty good example that will catch their attention, and they may think twice about pulling out of their driveway after the machine goes by. Okay, calibration. Well, first of all, I can say without a doubt, one of the most important things that can happen as a contractor mobilizes to a project, or once they mobilized to the project and got set up, by far, without question, not that other things aren't important as far as surface preparation or whatever, but as far as it relates to the mix itself, equipment calibration is the key to success. The application equipment should be calibrated to produce a mix, or is calibrated to produce a mix that is consistent with the job mix formula in the approved mix design. Mix design components are proportioned by weight, while the application equipment delivers materials by volume. It is essential that calibration be completed using the actual job site materials immediately prior to each job startup and in the presence of the buyer's authorized representative. No application equipment should be allowed to work on a job without proper calibration. Now, I want to note this is new. This is language from the new Design and Inspector's Manual, and the term immediately prior to each job startup is updated language. Years ago, it was very acceptable that calibrations done within a 3 to 6 month period of time prior to to your new project could be transferred and used on the project that you were doing. And there may still be cases where that's okay. But what this calibration does, and it's not a lengthy process, several hours, the equipment can be calibrated. Everybody can have a comfortable feeling knowing that the machinery is producing the mix that is called for in the job mix formula. It ensures to the contractor that things hasn't changed since their last project that they mobilized from. And it also confirms to the agency that's paying for the work that the contractor is doing their due diligence in making sure that they're providing a mix that is not only consistent but perfectly matched with that of the job mix formula. Again, we recommend that calibration take place prior to each job. I personally think that every contractor in this business can spare 2 to 3 hours to calibrate equipment while their folks are out preparing the surface, while they're out notifying the public, and while they're setting up the staging area. It's perfect timing to do that, and once they've done that calibration, they can use that information for verifying things throughout the project. Okay, here's a picture of a truck mounted job where they're calibrating 3 truck mounted units at the same time. Okay, it's important that each mixing unit used in the performance of the work shall be calibrated in the presence of the buyer's authorized representative prior to the start of the job. The documentation shall include an individual calibration of each material at various settings, which can be related to the machine's metering devices. Any equipment replacement affecting material proportioning requires that the machine be recalibrated. Examples of that may be if an emulsion pump goes bad or you have to change out a conveyor system, then you may need to calibrate that machine. That is not a common occurrence, doesn't happen very often. I just use those as examples of what may constitute the need for recalibrating. Okay, no machine will be allowed to work on the project until the calibration has been accepted. As I say, Design and Inspector's Manual describes a method of machine calibration, and you'll also find that at the Slurry Systems Workshop they do extensive presentations on that. We're not going to get too far into the weeds, mostly conceptual related today, but it's important that you familiarize yourself with the process. Depending upon who the manufacturer is, you can get information from them, or you can download calibration forms directly from the Design and Inspection Manual that I talked about earlier. So lots of ways to get that information. Just make sure that you do get that information and that calibration is performed prior to the startup. Okay. In a slurry surfacing system, the mixed design component proportions are based on the weight of dry aggregate. Everything's based on that, not only in the mixed design, but in the application rate as well. But it's important to know that, therefore, corrections for moisture in the aggregate are necessary. Setting the application equipment feed rates of emulsified asphalt, aggregate, mineral filler, water, and additives is critical to the successful application of a slurry surfacing system. The component materials output factors identified in the calibration process will assist the contractor and agency in quantifying daily material uses as well as aiding in the verification of application rates. That's a mouthful, but that is a very important statement right there. Calibration is enormously important. Okay. Slurry surfacing application equipment requires calibration because it does not mix in batches. Rather, current equipment continuously feeds the individual components, aggregate, emulsified asphalt, mineral filler, water, and additive to the front of the pug mill, which is the mixing chamber, while a homogeneous mixture of all of these components is continuously delivered out of the back of the pug mill to the spreader box. You can see in this schematic exactly that. You've got your aggregate bin here. You've got your aggregate gate here, mineral filler hopper. You've got your pug mill here, and the aggregate conveyor turns this way. And as it's delivering aggregate into the pug mill, this mineral filler is the calibrated amount is dropped on top of that conveyor, on top of that aggregate. It dumps into the pug mill. It's pre-wetted with the water spray bar, slightly mixed, then it's introduced to the emulsified asphalt about a third of the way in, vigorously mixed, discharged out the diverter into the spreader box that's behind the machine. This particular machine here goes right to left. It drags that spreader box down the road, leaving a new slurry sealed or microsurfacing overlay behind it. Now, on most equipment, and again, not to get too deep into the weeds, most of the equipment that's used in the industry today has constant displacement asphalt pump. So the pump pumps the same amount all the time, and the only way to alter your emulsion percentage is either by raising or lowering that aggregate gate. So that's just important to note, just a note, but this is what you can, what a typical schematic of a laydown machine would look like. Okay, bottom line with calibration is to measure is to know. Okay, now that we've calibrated, we've got to go into another important feature that we recommend on every project, and that's test strips. Okay, in my opinion, the test strip should be performed on the actual project site. And you can see here a nice test strip going down on the left. You can see a nice test strip here we did down on US 280 in Alabama on a preservation group study. This is important. They're part of the project. You don't want to go out and perform a test strip on a roadway that's not part of the project. You know, the surface texture may be different, the crown may be different, there may be all kinds of subtle differences to that pavement. It's always best to, like I said, use the project itself to perform your test strip. Okay. The goal here is to assure adequate workmanship, aesthetics, and cure time of the mixture is achievable when applied with the personnel, equipment, and materials intended for use during execution of the project. They should be performed in similar conditions as those expected during actual application. If you got a daytime project, test strip needs to be performed during the day. If you got a nighttime project, test strip should be performed at night. That way you know everybody can see all the lights work, materials working good, just the environment that the project's going to be performed in is the environment that the test strip needs to be done. Yeah. So if handwork is performed during the test strip, it should have a uniform application rate and surface texture that sufficiently matches that is applied by the spreader box. It will never match 100%. That's why the word sufficiently is used. And then after you get a little bit of traffic on it, it typically will iron out and everything will look the same. But handwork does typically tend to stand out a little bit, especially at first. Okay, let's talk about test strip evaluation. There's several things that you have to consider when doing that, and proportion optimization is first and foremost. Okay, within your job mix formula, there's generally, for lack of a better term, a little wiggle room or some tolerances set forth that you can operate in. You may have a 12% optimum emulsified asphalt content plus or minus 1%, which gives you a window of 11% to 13%. Now, depending upon the project site itself, that may help you with your proportion optimization decisions. If you've got a flushing chip seal pavement with excess binder on the surface, then running a high asphalt content in your slurry and microsurfacing may not be desired. And conversely, if you've got a highly oxidized pavement, it may be that you do want to run a little higher on your emulsified asphalt to cover those oxidation concerns. So again, that helps us optimize the application as far as mineral filler goes and additives go. It lets us tinker, maybe tinker is not the word, tweak the mix to where it provides us the most suitable work time for application. That may require a slight bit of adjustment on the mineral filler, on chemical additive if you're using it, and or water for a mixing mechanism. So that's the time during and after the test strip that we want to make those adjustments. We want to make sure that when we're evaluating the test strip that we do an application rate verification. If you're looking for 20 pounds of rock per square yard, you need to make sure that you use those factors determined during the calibration process to double check to make sure that you're within range of your specifications of that 20 pounds. Now that's going to vary, obviously, but if it's not, that's a simple adjustment, and you can make it and move forward. You also want to make sure that you're achieving good uniformity of surface texture. Make sure that the spreader box is set up properly, that the secondary and or your burlap drag is providing you with the desired surface texture uniformity when you're done with the test strip. You want to make sure the equipment's in good condition. You don't want to be shooting yourself in the foot with leaky equipment. Not only can equipment does leak. I mean, it is exactly that. It's equipment and needs constant maintaining. But if you've got a small hydraulic leak or an oil leak or things of that nature, those need to be taken care of. Making sure that those oil spots don't get on the pavement. The aggregate leaking can be a problem as well. If you've got a conveyor belt as it's turning, leaking dry aggregate under the machine, it's definitely going to cause you a bonding issue depending upon the severity of the leak. So you want to make sure that everything is working in good condition, and generally walking along beside the machine, watching it sit and run at idle prior to a test strip generally is a pretty good time to look at these things and verify that everything's in good shape. You want to make sure